So I will now call to order Tuesday, January 14th, 2025 policy session. We will now move on to our scheduled policy session. Gary, would you please introduce the first item?
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's only one policy session today, and it is 2025 State and Federal Legislative Agenda Approval. Our team from Public and Government Affairs will present. Tonya Holowetsky, the Director of Public and Government Affairs, Trent Wilson, Government Affairs Manager, and you'll also please review the protocols for legislative action today, please, with the board. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. Chair Roberts, nice to be here this morning. And we are here today to present the draft 2025 state and federal agendas and to request your approval. Before we review the details of each proposed agenda, I'd like to highlight some of the key processes that we follow in formulating the draft agendas and the steps we take to prepare for this session. So PGA works with all of you and the county departments to identify potential state and federal policy and funding priorities. And the proposed drafts that were submitted to you reflect those conversations. Once approved, the agendas do become foundational to PGA's legislative messaging and advocacy strategies, whether we're drafting policy statements or letters or preparing testimony. This allows us to remain agile and proactive as we navigate the session. So during the session, PGA coordinates with you, the BCC, and departments to advance the county's initiatives and priorities. We also provide weekly updates to the BCC throughout the session. We do bring issues that are not covered by the approved agendas as they emerge to the BCC and subject matter departments for input and consideration. When time is of the essence for any of these emerging or unexpected situations, we do convene a special operations meeting to assess the issue and to determine the county's position. The county chair and vice chair, along with county administrator, county council, PGA staff, and the subject matter department directors do attend these meetings. The full board is informed of the situation and the outcome as soon as feasible, and then no later than a week. So finally, in the attached documents that you received from us, we do also outline the process for legislative letters and testimony from individual commissioners. I'm not going to review those in detail right now for the sake of time, but we are happy to answer any questions you may have about that process. So I'm going to hand it over to Trent to walk you through the state and federal agendas. And as we review the agendas, please consider the following options. You can either adopt the 2025 state and federal agendas as they are drafted. You can amend them based on the conversations that will follow, or you can take no action at this time. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and ask Trent to walk us through the agendas and then open it up for your input and discussion.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Tonya. Well said. Good morning, commissioners. Let's start with the state agenda. What I'll do is I'll go through the agenda at a high level, talk about how it's structured and what all this means. I won't go into each topic, but happy to answer or pause for any questions. I'll pause at the end of the state agenda so we can focus on that. And then after those questions are satisfied, we can go to the federal agenda. So I just have found that it's helpful to separate these two for conversational purposes. So you'll see in the state agenda draft that's included in your packet, it's divided into 3 sections: initiatives, priorities, and principles. And I think it's really important for our incoming commissioners as well as for the general public just to always review why there is that separation within our agenda. For the initiatives within our agendas, those are the topics that, but for Clackamas County, nobody else is going to really focus on those things. So in here you see the recovery campus, which has been a priority of the Board of Commissioners for a few years now, as well as the transportation package, which will happen with or without Clackamas County, but the items within a transportation package, that's where your priorities will need to be elevated. That's why that's an initiative this particular year. I want to be clear, especially with the initiatives, because that's our primary energy here in the 2025 session, what you're approving here when you approve this agenda, especially for the transportation package, that you want these priorities in the transportation package, that it is focused around 205 or Sunrise or transit or O&M related to the work that we do here at the county or our partners for projects that exist within the county, like 205. And what you are not approving here today, because we'll come back to you when this time comes, is you are not approving a tax increase, because we will not do that without your guidance. but that is what a transportation package is. So I want to be very clear. It will increase transportation taxes. So this gives us guidance on what policies to work on, and when we have the legislation or the bills or the language around what is actually being proposed, we will come back to you for guidance on whether to support that or not. We will not do that without you. But I will invite you or encourage you to be thinking about what sort of changes to transportation funding you might be willing to support, especially with such high priority projects that exist within Clackamas County. You don't need to know that today, but when we get to that point in the future, and there will be conversations between now and then, I would invite you to be thinking about those, and we should be having conversations internally around what is supportable or what is not supportable. On the priorities section of the agenda, that is something that is more, I would say, offensive versus defensive, but it's more offense related. These are topics that are high priorities for the county, such as housing or addressing the addictions crisis or Supreme Court decisions that affect how we sell foreclosed properties. Those are things that we are putting active energy into because we know there are topics that will exist at the state legislature. Legislators are supporting those projects or moving them forward, and we can be actively engaged in those. We are not working on those topics in isolation. We are working with partners and coalitions, which is why they are not initiatives, but they are things that we will be working on. And then the principles part of the agenda is really the defensive side of our agenda, things that we can't anticipate, things that we don't know about. Already there are 2,200 bills that have been introduced for the state legislative session this year. That's just the first drop. There will be more bills. And so because we can't anticipate all of that legislation, we use these principles to guide what makes the county, what is the work that we do within our departments so that we can address those as they come at us and so that we don't have to come back to you on all 2,200 bills. If they fall within these principles, what you approved today gives us guidance to work on those. And if there's ever any question about taxes or money, we'll always come back to you, or if it's a policy topic, we'll come back to you if we're not sure about it. So that's how the agenda is structured here. And I want to pause here at the state agenda for any questions that you have before we go to the federal one.
Commissioner West.
Trent, thank you. I think you guys captured a lot of what has been the board's priorities in here. Thank you. Good job. One thing that I'm going to jump right into the recovery campus at the statewide level here, which has been a board priority and I think is pretty inspirational and ambitious, and it would be helpful, I think, if the state could help participate in the funding of that campus. Currently, there is a $10 million ask within OHA's budget. Sorry, I dropped my glasses. Within OHA's budget. And we're really thankful for their partnership to see the vision that we're trying to build here on this around 7 acres, building out a full care continuum, build the assets and resources necessary to deal with the crisis before us. And it's been all too slow to see these type of assets get up and running, but we're trying to do it in Clackamas. But I think that it would also behoove us, and I guess I formally want to propose that we ask from the legislature outside of OHA's budget an additional $10 million for a total ask of $20 million. That would almost get us to 100% funding. We're already basically 50% there, shovel ready, almost 50% there. I think we can get 50% there. But we've been very ambitious, and I also have had some conversations with the Clackamas Caucus, and I don't think many of them are totally clued in with the campus. I think maybe a tour and getting all 16 of them on board. I can't think of one of them that wouldn't be inspired by what we're trying to do here. It's already being touted and allotted across the region as quite potentially impactful. And once again, OHA, thank you for partnering with us right out the gate for that initial $10 million, but let's just get it done. The region needs to see this done. We have some uncertainty around the SHS funding, and we need to just commit on this promise and get it over the finish line. So that's my ask. That would take a board action to add that additional financial ask to our state legislative agenda. I don't know when we're doing motions or not. I'd be happy to make a motion, but I hope my colleagues will be open to that additional funding ask for the recovery campus.
Thanks. Commissioner Schrader.
Well, I hesitate to do this, but I was going to see if we could, oh, don't look at me like that. I'm going to get nervous, and the friend's like, no. I was wondering if under the rubric of safe, healthy communities and under the rubric of workforce and economic development, if we could maybe add childcare to that. It's something that I've been personally working on, colleagues. It's up to you if you want to make that one of the things that we track in the legislature. One of the things that we're finding, it's not just for early childhood education, which is critically important for brain development, but it is an economic development issue because if people can't get to work because of childcare, it's an issue. My last personal experience was my daughter in Boston, bringing home her little girl who had thrown up in daycare and dropping her off with me and having to go into a trial at court. This just happened, and bless her heart, we all got sick, but that's okay. Okay, it was worth it. So it's kind of a little bit of a personal issue for me, and so we don't have to make a decision today. I just wanted to throw that out there, and would it really incredibly I'll try and do most of it. Would it incredibly increase your workload just to kind of have that on the radar?
No, in
No, I
fact,
mean-
I would draw your attention, sorry, to interrupt.
Yeah.
I would draw your attention to the third section, the Grow a Vibrant Economy,
Yeah.
where we've
You
connected
did-
it to workforce and childcare. Are you asking that we move that up into the ensure safe, healthy?
Yeah,
or
I think
just-
I would think that would make most sense to me, yeah, grow a vibrant economy, and,
Oh, so it's fine where it is?
yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, we
But
got it.
I just
Good.
wanted to just say that if we can track a lot of that, that'd be great. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you.
And Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, maybe it already fits, but maybe spelling it out similar to what Commissioner Schrader talked about daycare, and that is, and I'll digress and explain this, but I'm just going to say it right now, is that maybe some efforts on trying to get the threshold for civil commitment addressed. It's an important issue. Absolutely. And so here's where I digress into explaining how and why. What we have learned through this SHS process and also the work prior, during, and where we are today is that approximately 60%, rough numbers, approximately 60% of the people who have been offered housing that have refused it, and those that refused it have been identified as needing either mental health, behavioral health, addiction services, and/or really need to be perhaps committed, whether that's temporary or whether that is, whatever that may be. That could be because of living disabilities, it could be because of impacts from drug abuse or health issues, but there's a huge challenge. And so if we're going to be successful with placing people and helping people that are homeless, houseless, then I think we need to have the tools. And knowing that the state ranks in the nation as low as it does on behavioral health services and provision of services, that, we have a lot of work to do. And I totally understand, but concerned, understand where the governor and the state is coming from with some of the mandates. But if we're going to be successful, I think we need attention being drawn to that, as well as not just civil commitment, as well as a threshold for what people in the behavioral health, those that are educated, the threshold for certification. So that's another challenge, that the standards to get certified to be a healthcare, mental health provider, whatnot, in all those different professions is higher in Oregon than it is in a lot of other states. So it's hard to recruit people from other states when they can't meet the qualifications. Obviously, pay that's commensurate with their education or their expenses or their livelihood is also a factor. But I think those are two important ingredients that are left out of the state's approach that I think ought to be addressed. And I don't know how we, whatever your suggestions are to address all of that, but the other aspect of the SHS funding, I had a long conversation last night about this as well, and that is that only the metro region has this SHS funding, and the rest of the state has a dribble of the monies. And yet Clackamas County, half of our population is outside the metro boundary. So we have a vested concern and interest in, I would think, about maybe a different approach altogether financially. So, like what if the state actually provided that support? And I think maybe could actually be more efficient with it when you look at the behavioral health and the civil commitment, all that. We need state cooperation. We need a partnership. But from a funding standpoint, I you know, the metro region sure shares a lot of the population, but we're not reaching everyone in the state, and I think it's broken. It's almost a hodgepodge, so to speak, that we're doing a little bit of funding, and the state might be able to fund other counties more so, and yet it's almost like we're subsidizing. You can all make an argument for a subsidy there. I know these are broad topics, and we, you know, in the priorities, but I'm looking for your guidance on how we fold that into the conversation, because I think that the opportunity, I'm hearing a lot of legislators talk about the civil commitment and the thresholds for certification as one of the barriers. So I think we need to strike while the iron's hot.
Thank you, Commissioner. I actually really love this conversation because it gives me an opportunity to test the strength of these principles for a minute. So civil commitment is a topic that we track very closely with our behavioral health office as well as our district attorney office because it happens in partnership. There's a cycle, right, where someone gets civil commitment usually into the state hospital. State hospital is overwhelmed. They release somebody sometimes a little bit early. That responsibility of caretaking falls to the behavioral health department. And if somebody recommits or recidivizes, that liability has historically fallen on the county, and then it goes back to the DA, and it's a nasty loop. So we have actually had on our legislative agenda for a long time a request to reduce liability imposed on the county for state mandates, such as, you know, taking on the responsibility of a decision that happens at a state hospital. We've had that in our agenda for many years. It's actually your top priority in your state agenda. So I'll point to that at first to say, you know, advocate for legislation that provides full cost and predictable revenue as well as reasonable liability protection for local governments providing state mandated resources. So I would say under that big umbrella, we have the ability to advocate on behalf of things like civil commitment to make sure that we're not held responsible for the cost or the liability of the work that would fall to us if the state makes a decision around the state hospital or releases. What happens at the DA's office, it's a little outside of our control, but respectively, like, we work in partnership with them to advocate for that. And then I would also say in the principles, we call out many of those things that you just described: behavioral health challenges, rate of crime and recidivism, best practices in justice-involved individuals, which is to not release them early if they, just because of hospital capacity type things. So in that regard, I would say that the agenda as it's written gives us plenty of flexibility to work on civil commitments with our partners, with our departments, and with the associations and advocates trying to make changes there. And ultimately, it's a complex enough topic that we wouldn't support or oppose anything until we see final language, and we would come back to you on it because it would probably have some funding mechanisms tied to it as well. How's that?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think it was important to verbalize it, and if there's consensus among my colleagues that that's something to have a focus on, should there be a bill, that we bring that back. And unless it's verbalized, I'm not, you know, I want you to bring to our attention is important to me, and I hope my colleagues also support that.
Great. I'm going to go to Jane as a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify, I believe what PTA was talking about is actually aid and assist, not civil commitments.
True.
And so as we go forward, they are two separate processes. They can both be included in that, but they are different processes.
And thank you. And Commissioner West.
Thank you, Chair. One thing I've noticed is that I think in a really succinct way you guys capture in the federal legislative piece around natural resources, wildfires, and whatnot. It is not lost on me after I toured the Bull Run fire over there. Well, it's Camp Creek fire over by Bull Run. We are lucky we didn't lose Bull Run.
Yeah.
The #1 water supply to the Portland metro area was absolutely in threat, and thank God the winds in this case worked out and we got ahead of it. But that's federal, right? That's a federal, but when we had the Clackamas fires, those were not all federal lands. And there's an overall conversation that we're all very acutely aware of right now across the country and local governments when we're seeing some of these natural disasters. And how are we being adaptable to those things as a community, as leaders, and being prepared and ready? With our state resources, and we just had the Clackamas fires where, you know, that part of our county the sky lit up red, and we had to evacuate animals and people, and it was a hard time for our county. I want to know if we have anything within the state side of our legislative agenda that talks about readiness, that talks about forest management, those resources necessary. I don't know whether it's water, whether it's cleaning up underbrush, whether it's doing fire hardening and defenses, and having a conversation around that. Knowing what we know now and seeing what's happened to our neighbors here in the West Coast, that we are protecting the property, the life, and the safety of our constituents the best we can. And with that being up there, I think that we need to have something in the statewide side that deals with wildfire emergency management the same way as it does that we're doing a little bit on our federal side. I hear that language more on the federal side. But it's not just federal land that we're talking about here. Also, what are the assets within Clackamas County or surrounding, in this region that are absolutely emergency assets that have to be fortified, expanded on? We need to find other funding. Maybe it's an airport, maybe it's a water source, maybe it's, a certain place where we can get marine boats to, or I don't know what it is, or ways we can get waters into the planes that maneuver and drop waters on things. I want to make sure that we're being very strategic about our assets that we need and must have in case we either have the giant earthquake or more likely we have in our fire season more tragic fires, and we lost a lot in our last fire season. And I want to see us maybe be able to start having a conversation in our legislative policies, since we're such a big county, and out of the Tri-County area, we probably have the most forest lands and natural resources within our borders, and we have the largest rural community within a county in the entire state. That should also, at a state level, be a conversation we're having. And maybe that's another conversation with the Clackamas Caucus that we should have. I know for sure the recovery campus, we need to make sure we're bringing them up to speed on. I called one legislator the other day. She's like, "What is your ask? I didn't even know anything. Why didn't I know anything about that?" And we're going into session. So we need to make sure that our legislative caucuses across both sides of the aisle are on board. Thank you for having Bull Run Bridge in there. I know, Dan, you've been working hard for years to close that funding gap, and it'd be great to get some federal funds to replace that bridge that is absolutely at the end of its life. And I think that's my comments. And I can yield the floor back, but I have a motion I still like to make whenever the board is ready, or when the chair would like to entertain it.
Yeah, so from what I hear from my colleagues, I hear a number of things, actually. Additional funds for the recovery campus, child care, threshold of civil commitment or aid and assist, and it sounds like that's already included from your interpretation, and then a little bit about disaster readiness. So with all those things that I've heard, I guess number one would turn to Gary, and my question would be, do we hold this for another meeting, make those amendments, or go ahead and take a motion on those changes now?
Say do it today, please, because the state legislature's already started, so we want to move forward on this. And you don't have to make motions for each one. You just direct staff to add it to this package, and they will do that, and that'll be part of your final motion.
All right. So I think with that being said, if there's no further discussion on this, if there's a motion.
Chair, I have my light on there. I just want to add one thing. Commissioner West reminded me about the Bull Run Bridge. I want to, knowing that there's a lot of competition for transportation dollars and very few dollars to go around, I just want to share with my colleagues that the Bull Run Bridge ranks 2 out of the state, out of a scale of 100. It's one of the worst ranked bridges in the state of Oregon, if not the lowest. So it is pending closure, which is going to cut off the community. We had a group of community members here testifying about their concern about that bridge being cut off. Unfortunately, being the politically not as populated and politically as powerful, therefore as powerful, a lot of other regional projects jump in front. We are always on hand and knee trying to get funding for this bridge. So I just want to make my colleagues aware that this is something that we've been really working on for a long time, and hoping, whether it's federal or state or both, that we get something to move this bridge so that that community is not cut off. So, Chair, I'm willing to make a motion to direct staff to address these changes and incorporate them in our legislative agenda as advised.
You hear a motion from Salvis. Do I have a second?
Your motion is for all the issues addressed in, cool, yeah, I'll second all of those to be addressed.
Any further discussion?
Commissioners, you're referring to the state agenda, correct? Or both state and federal? You haven't talked about federal yet.
State.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so this is going to be strictly on the state agenda. Okay, so As I understand it right now, Salvis has made a motion to make the amendments as stated today by staff for the state agenda for 2025. It's been seconded by Commissioner West. Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, will you please call the poll?
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner Fireside.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. And then we'll come back to the federal legislative agenda.
Thank you very much. And so just for clarification of what I just heard, so that we're all hearing the same thing, that's make the $10 million request for the Recovery Center $20 million, and we'll sort the details on the strategy later. And then elevate from principal into priority, the wildfire language, as well as civil commitment language. And then I heard from Commissioner Schrader that childcare good is good where it's at.
Yeah, that's okay, as long, I just want it tracked, and if I have an opportunity to go down there, you'd let me know. That'd be
Excellent.
good.
Perfect. I just wanted to confirm that we were talking about the same thing. Your notes match my notes, and we're good to go.
Sure.
Excellent. All right, here on the federal agenda, same division of labor there. We have the initiatives, the priorities, and the principles. The top initiatives are around those transportation projects, and Commissioner Savas and Commissioner West, you just mentioned a couple of them. Really, it has been the Bull Run Bridge, as well as any opportunities up around the mountain, and especially, of course, the I-205 federal highway that goes through the middle of Clackamas County's most populated area that still needs funding for the bottleneck project, and making sure that we're working with ODOT to apply for federal support on that project. So that's really where our transportation initiative comes from. The priorities are similar to what you just talked about, again, focusing on the work of H3S, since a majority of their funds come from state and federal resources, as well as our two Willamette Falls Locks projects that we're expecting to have some momentum, including the Locks and the Heritage Area Coalition designation as a national heritage area, the wilderness and wildfire topics, as well as a topic important to West, which is a liability for around PFAS or forever chemicals that come through the system. West is a receiver of those chemicals, not a creator of those chemicals, and there is a massive federal conversation around liability on that topic, and we are asked, I would say twice a month, to provide support on that topic, and so your direction here today allows us to be nimble when we get those requests and work with West and their agencies and stakeholders to support them in that effort to make sure that they are not the receivers of liability of something that they don't create. And then the principles are identical.
Comments, questions, Commissioner West?
Yeah, the advocate and to support the Willamette Falls and Landing Area designation as a national heritage area. Can you share with us what the benefit is of having that designation and what potentially comes with it?
Money. There's the federal parks program, they create the system, and there's money that you can apply for there. And so it creates some grant opportunities for a heritage area. And then it also, I think, creates some additional tourism benefits that are beyond that money. But at the federal level, there's money tied to it.
Is there some momentum there to help us get that important designation? I know some of the answers to these questions I'm asking, but we're in a public meeting, so yeah.
Yes, it is my understanding that the partners, especially those partners at the, who work on the coalition, and Commissioner Schrader sits on that board, so I would defer to her for some of these, have been working very closely with the tribes and other partners to find some consensus around the language that would be submitted into this request. That was with our former delegation, so we have new congressional delegation members that would, so that may take a little bit of extra time, but the group itself has been doing the work, as we would call it, to try to get it across the finish line. There has been some localized heartburn, which is why it hasn't really been able to move in the past, but what I've heard is that has kind of been resolved. So we're here to support that group if they are ready to go forward.
Ready to go forward, terrific.
It's not us, we're helping them.
When we put our county priorities together, are we considering how to get some of these things moved forward at a federal level? One, we're a small state. The current administration and the makeup of Congress is all Republican. We're a pretty blue Democrat state. and trying to figure out how, as a nonpartisan board, just trying to do good local work and bring back what we need from the federal government. How do we weigh that and consider that as we put our priorities forward? We don't have representation within the majority party right now in DC. It doesn't mean we can't be effective or work across the aisle. I'd like to just understand our strategy a little bit with the realities of the new administration and who's going to be in power in Washington.
It's a great question, and it's a complicated answer, so I'll do my best to keep it brief. The best thing that we can control is things that we can control. And so putting out good work, finding those opportunities to apply for things that make the most sense for us, and making the case for under the conditions and criteria that are given to us. Advocate as best as we can within DC. We have a federal lobby team that operates out of DC that helps get us into rooms as needed. And so we work with them diligently to have the best meetings that we can have and the right meetings. I'm actually really proud of our federal delegation, in particular the senators, who work pretty hard to have bipartisan efforts. I would say most of our wildfire work is passed at a bipartisan level. So we have a pretty sharp delegation on the Senate side. We have younger or freshman level and sophomore level delegation members on the House side. And so that is an opportunity where we're in education mode with some of them, because at least with Congresswoman Bynum, she's familiar with Clackamas County, but maybe not at the federal level or maybe more focused on a localized area. Congresswoman Dexter, pretty new to the Clackamas County issues at large, especially those on the mountain, which is in our district. And so we're in education mode with those offices right now, and they're still setting up their staff. So some of it is just what can we control, what can we apply for, making sure that we're doing our due diligence to apply for the best things that we can apply for. We also know historically that during the former Trump administration, as we're going to the new one, there was a heavy emphasis on rural priorities. And we have, as we've talked about here, the largest rural population by number, not by percentage, but by number in the state. And so we can leverage some of that in our communication or focus more on those projects where we think they might have a more strategic advantage during the incoming administration. But I would also say Congress moves super slow. And also, they don't pass very many bills that are localized. They pass more state-level pieces. And so I think this is the long game. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and things change every 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
How's that?
Yeah, thank you.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I chose to bring this up under federal, though it has needs some state work as well. And it's complex, but I will just kind of give you a brief overview. It has been for years now, dating back my first awareness of this issue about 12 years ago, when the government camp rest stop was closed, or threatened to be closed. And so our state legislators got together, and I discovered a number, how those are all funded and whatnot, but we did get some state support to keep that going. On the federal side, what's happening up there right now, the Oregon consensus with the states involved in this, as well as the federals. The federal side, we got a FLAP grant to work on Mount Hood access recreation opportunities, and so knowing that's a big driver for this gondola project and moving people through that recreation area, now because of space constraints and parking constraints, that rest stop is now back subject to threatened to be closed again. The idea is that it's coordinated and there's efforts being made to open another one. I just thought that, not to get in the way of the federal legislation, but to make sure we're all coordinated and our federal delegation can apply some friendly pressure to the state to make sure that the funds necessary and the activities necessary to move that project forward, the rest stop individually, which is a new location, potentially on the other side of the highway, building it, siting it, and ODOT's cooperation with that is an imperative. And just so you know, the state does not operate rest stops. One would think they do, but they don't. It's actually operated by the OTIC, the Oregon Transportation Information Council. And so it's this wicked, weird, but ODOT does own them, the properties, but they just don't operate them. So that's why we need ODOT's cooperation with this, as well as some state funding for that. So I just want to make you aware of that.
Thank you, Commissioner. All right, is ready to entertain a motion to adopt the federal agenda legislation?
I have one more question.
Oh,
One more quick question. It's a little vague, and we do a lot around housing and human services, and a lot of our priorities are in that camp. So support funding for housing and human services program and other county operations that are reliant on federal sources. So I have concerns that some of the things that we have planned around, are they going to still be available to us federally based on the new Congress and who's in the White House? I like the 1115 waiver program, that's essential, or how we get Medicaid and Medicare funding, supportive services around addiction and recovery, those types of things. Like I would like to, I think we need to be a little more specific. Maybe we're also just kind of like, where are we at? Like what the hell, like what's happening? But I have a little heartburn in that arena right now, maybe like a lot of other Oregonians. So I don't know what to expect moving forward, but I know we do have more specific things. Some of it is a little bit like the 1115 waiver and all that's kind of state, I don't like, but it impacts how we deliver services even at like county clinics or with our constituents. I don't know if we could parse that out a little bit more. What are you thinking? It does seem a little vague right now.
So it is, for many of the reasons you just laid out, which is the complete uncertainty of what to expect over the next 2 years, let alone 6 months. As I mentioned before, federal work moves at a snail's pace. And so what I think this allows us to do is work with our lobby team in DC for education purposes and work internally with us, that as requests come in and as more is known, we can come back to you on these issues. But this gives us the license to monitor and watch and protect and defend. Again, think about the principles and what that gives us more leverage to focus on and work on. And when we get the detailed request, we will not, the county, because Congress moves so slow, the county never sends a letter or a logo in support of anything that's a federal topic without coming to you first. It's very different than the state legislative session, which meets every single day and is passing thousands of bills within a 6-month period. So it's just a different pace or ecosystem by which we operate it. We use the state agenda to be a lot more nimble. There's not really a proven need for being nimble at the federal level for the last couple of years.
Yeah.
So I guess what I would say is that just gives us license to make sure we're monitoring it and paying attention to it and working with the department to be in the right place. And then we'll come to you on those moments where we have the details.
Okay, cool. I want to keep a bookmark in that though. We need to be acutely aware with that topic. Thank you.
Great. I think we're at a point for a motion. If somebody's up to a motion to.
Yeah, I move to approve the federal agenda and with the focus on some of the comments to be integrated into the agenda as needed, as suggested by staff.
Second.
Commissioner has moved to approve the federal legislative agenda for 2025. It's with a focus on the comments that were addressed today, seconded by Commissioner Schrader. Any further discussion? Hearing none, clerk, would you please call the poll?
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Fireside.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Aye. Motion passes 5-0. And unless there's any other business, looking both ways, this business meeting is adjourned. Thank you.